Hey guys, welcome to the final part of the history of Crash Bandicoot. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2 yet, I've left a link down in the description. With that aside, let's get started. Shortly after the completion of Crash Nitro Kart, Vicarious Visions discussed with Vivendi Universal Games what the next Crash Bandicoot... Wait, what? Vivendi Universal Games? Who's that? Well, in the year 2000, Vivendi bought Universal Interactive along with the rights to Crash Bandicoot. Later in 2003, they renamed that division to Vivendi Universal Games. Now with that explained, Vivendi approached Vicarious Visions with an idea to bring Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon together for the first time. Vicarious Visions applauded the idea and collaborated with Vivendi to create Crash Bandicoot Purple, Ripto's Rampage. There's also another version of the game, but in Spyro's perspective. The story begins with Cortex and Ripto plotting a way to get rid of Crash and Spyro. They end up disguising Ripto's minions as Spyro, as a result causing confusion among Spyro and Crash. Let me get this straight. How does one get confused between this and this? I mean, look at it. It's just a big lizard with a Spyro mask. So Crash and Spyro end up falling for the trick, but eventually they uncover the scheme and team up. The game tries to combine the platforming elements of Crash with the mini-games of Crash Bash. The classic warp rooms are replaced with overworlds. This is where most of the platforming happens, and it's weak. The layout of the platforms are very basic, providing little challenge. The mini-games, on the other hand, are mostly unoriginal. Sure, there are a handful of them, but most are just variations of older ones. Take this minigame for example. It mimics Breakout for the Atari, except it's a lot less intuitive. Moving ahead, Traveler's Tales begins work on a new Crash title for the consoles. As much as Traveler's Tales admired Naughty Dog and the strong roots they gave Crash, they did not want to follow in their footsteps. If Traveler's Tales opted to create a classic Crash platformer at that time, they would be facing fierce competition from Jak and Daxter and Ratchet & Clank, both developed by Naughty Dog and Insomniac, whom are veterans in the genre of 3D platforming. Hence, they decided to give a twist to Crash, which involved free roaming, a humorous story, and cast of characters. Speaking of funny characters, I absolutely love the Cortex in this game. Lex Lang was hired as the voice actor, and he gave the character a complete makeover. A good one. After Lex was hired, Traveler's Tales let him hear some audio from Clancy Brown, the original Cortex voice actor.
Ooga ooga, it was that infernal Bandicoot.
From that, Lex created a hilarious version of Cortex that made everyone laugh.
Divert your gaze or you'll go crystal crazy.
The game was later released in September of 2004, called Twinsanity, on the PS2 and Xbox. The story carries off 3 years after the Wrath of Cortex, where Uka Uka and Cortex struck land after floating in an ice block for a few years. Cortex, disguised as Coco, lures Crash to a trap, which ends up failing. Both travel through a long tunnel until they're confronted by 2 mutated parrots whom threatens to destroy Wumpa Islands. Cortex and Crash decide to team up to save the day.
Yes, yes! In the dark ocean of my intellect swims a magnificent whale of a plan.
So does the free roam style of this game work? Well, some felt that it departed too much from the original formula. In my opinion, the free roam platforming was not bad, but what really made the game stand out was the story and characters. The game had some intuitive parts where you had to make use of Cortex. The music in this game suits the atmosphere of the game very well, thanks to the band Spiral Mouth. Now let's skip ahead to October of 2005, where a third Crash Kart racing game was being released. Radical Entertainment was in charge of the development this time. It was named Crash Tag Team Racing and released on various consoles. However, a DS version was cancelled during production. The story is about Von Clutch, an owner of a huge park. A bunch of gems were stolen from him and he offers the deed to the park to whoever can recover the gems. And of course, Crash and company are up for the task.
You'll hand over the deed to this amusement enterprise? No questions asked?
Radical Entertainment took a complete 90-degree turn from the classic Crash racing games. The hub world is now all platforming. Think of the hub world in Crash Team Racing, except Crash is on his 2 feet jumping around. I assume the point of this was to make the game feel more adventurous, but personally, I just wanted to race. When you finally enter a level, there are various modes to choose from. Overall, the game focuses a lot on weapon usage and merging with other racers. What I miss most is actually the triple boost system, which was present in Crash Team Racing and Crash Nitro Kart. Interesting fact is that this is actually the first Crash game that's rated higher than E for everyone. And I'm sure this is the reason why.
What's wrong with you?
Good job, Radical. Good job. With the string of success of 7 straight Mario Party games at the time, it wouldn't make sense not to take another shot at that genre after Crash Bash, right? Well, the Japanese developers, Dimps, decided to go for it. Crash Boom Bang was released on the DS in July of 2006, making it the first Crash game to originate from Japan. The story is about a very wealthy individual called the Viscount, who is in search of a special power crystal. After failing to find it himself, he hosts a contest to trick Crash and Coco into helping him. I've heard some bad things about this game, so when I picked it up, I thought I was prepared, but little did I know it was gonna be like this. You're first thrown onto a board game layout, and immediately a lot of things start happening. That's because this game isn't exactly turn-based. This makes the flow of the game feel very disorganized. On top of that, the game has poor AI. You can often catch them using items in a stupid way, such as using a position swap item on the first turn even though everyone is on the same square. There are a couple of very annoying aspects of the game which made me want to pull my hair out. 1. Taunting text bubbles pops up frequently on screen, obstructing your view in a minigame. Second is the annoying laugh Coco keeps making every time something nice happens. After a few of these, you'll either be turning off your sound or your DS. Alright, here is where we enter the 3rd generation of Crash, and we're about to see some huge departures. Yes, I'm talking huge. Development of this new Crash game started shortly after Tag Team Racing. Taking advantage of the recent release of the Nintendo Wii and its motion controls, Radical Entertainment decided to implement that into Crash's combat. In order to promote the game, Sierra Entertainment, the publishers, decided to start a joint campaign with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Through this partnership, the new Crash game got promotion, and the Cancer Society group could attract more people to raise money. I'm actually not too sure how much money the group ended up raising that year, but I hope it was a good amount. The game was released for these platforms in October of 2007 and was called Crash of the Titans. The story starts off with the Bandicoots minding their own business when suddenly, Cortex flies in to kidnap Coco and Aku Aku. Crash manages to free Aku Aku and the duo set out to save Coco.
My powers were useless against them.
First thing you notice is the drastic change in character designs and environment. Personally, I think the new character models look okay. It just took a lot of getting used to. In the end though, I still prefer the original designs. The environments look bright and happy. It actually reminded me a lot of some areas in the Rayman series. Rather than treating this like a Crash game, it's better to treat it as if you're playing a new IP, mainly because not only are the cosmetics different, but so is the gameplay. Crash's primary moves are punches and kicks. The objective of the game is to tame mutants one by one in order to perform better attacks. Platforming is no longer on narrow paths, rather large spaces. The biggest change of all would be the absence of the classic crates. Radical Entertainment tried to incorporate a humorous story similar to Twinsanity. In my opinion though, many of the jokes felt forced and ended up feeling very unnatural.
You were a skank! I'm just so proud of you right now.
However, they did do a good job with Engine's insane personality.
Thank you, Master!
Now, Crash of the Titans isn't a bad game. In fact, it sold quite well and was released again on Platinum for the PS2. Perhaps it appealed to a new audience, but if you're an old school Crash fan, Just don't go in expecting classic Crash gameplay. Shortly after Crash of the Titans, Radical Entertainment started work on a sequel. There were a few elements they wanted to put in the game that they didn't have a chance to in the first game. Seeing the response from game testers for Crash of the Titans, they realized that many of them held on to one mutant. Reason being that they felt a bond with that mutant after a string of victories. In response, Radical incorporated a mutant storing system for Crash in this sequel. Radical also listened to fan requests such as the ability to play as Coco and mission designs that make the game less linear. The game was released for these platforms in 2008 and was called Crash: Mind Over Mutant. The story continues directly from Crash of the Titans. Cortex sends Nina away and immediately teams up with Dr. Brio. They create a headgear that can manipulate people and transform them into monsters. Crash and Aku Aku once again sets off to save their friends and stop the villains.
Looks like it's just you and me, Crash.
Radical decided to bring some of Crash's roots back, such as digging, climbing, and explosive crates. But as you can see, they also heavily altered it. Even amidst complaints from fans about the fixed camera in Crash of the Titans, Radical decided to stick with it in Mind Over Mutant. Their main reason was because they could build more detail into objects, since they know what you can see. But the real problem is that this game has a number of backtracking parts. The poor positioning of the camera in these parts make it hard to predict what lies ahead of Crash. After the release of Crash Mind Over Mutant, there hasn't been news on any major releases for a new Crash Bandicoot game, other than an iPhone Crash Kart game in 2010. However, there have been attempts by avid fans of the franchise to bring it back to life. Though it's incomplete, they still look really awesome, especially for a fan-made game. Well, it's been a long run, but my Crash Bandicoot retrospective is finally complete! Everyone that's been following and watching, thank you so much. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. But now, it's time to step into the realm of the next retrospective.